like we're a go. Hi, folks. My name's Mark Cruz. Welcome to Riffs with Mark. This is a lesson series where we look at improvisation, and that's making things up on the guitar. If I go like this, I'm improvising. I'm making something up. Now, the thing about improvisation is that you eventually, after you've been playing guitar for quite a while and practicing improvisation, you get to a point where you're truly able to make up new original things on the spot. But usually the way people start with improvising is they start by learning riffs, and that's what this course is all about. It's about me teaching you different riffs. And if you didn't attend the course last week, we looked at riffs surrounding the major pentatonic scale. That's this scale here. And this week, we're going to look at riffs surrounding the minor pentatonic scale. And each week, we're going to do a little bit of conceptual learning. At the beginning, we'll talk about a new scale or a new concept. Last week, major pentatonic. This week, minor pentatonic. In a few weeks, we'll look at implementing a little bit of the mixolydian mode, or at least the flat 7 of that. But that's then. We'll get to that then. But each week, I teach you a little bit about a concept, and then we look at riffs within that concept and ways that you can use those riffs in your own improvisation. So I'm going to look to teach you about 3 riffs today after we get through the conceptual part. And then how to use those in your scales, different ways that you can play them, different ways that you can change them, edit them, make them your own. So let's go ahead and hop into it. The minor pentatonic scale. You may already know it. If you want to very first, Jason Mounts is doing the jam play part of this lesson. So Jason, would you please put up the minor pentatonic and blues scale theory sheet? Folks, if you already know your theory on the minor pentatonic scale, that is fantastic. But just a real quick review here, the minor pentatonic scale is based on the minor scale, the natural minor scale, which sounds like this. If I go C, D, E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, C, that is a C natural minor scale. It's a great scale, but for improvisation purposes, a lot of the time it's really nice to use the C minor pentatonic scale. And the way we find that is we take out the second note of the natural minor scale, and we take out the flat 6th note of the natural minor scale. And so we get this scale that sounds like this. And we call that the C minor pentatonic scale. And if I continue that up another octave, it goes like that. I come up here. So that's the minor pentatonic scale, and in this case, it is a C minor pentatonic scale. That's the one that we're going to be looking at this week. Last week we looked at C major. This week we're only going to be looking within C minor, okay? And you'll be able to, of course, transpose these riffs, bring them to other keys. If you know how to do that, great. If not, that's what next week's lesson is going to be for. So C minor pentatonic scale here. And you may have remembered with the major pentatonic scale, we used what was called the blue note. In the case of the major pentatonic scale, that was a flat 3. In the case of the minor pentatonic scale, we're going to take the 5 of the scale. 1, flat 3, 4, 5, and bring it down a half step, okay? So we've got... And Jason, if at this point you'd be willing to put up the scale diagrams of the minor pentatonic scale, if everybody would kind of take a look at those, there are 5 different scale shapes of the minor pentatonic scale. They are all the same notes in the sense of it's the same 5 notes repeated, or 6 notes repeated in this case because we're adding that blue note. But they're in different shapes all up the fingerboard. Now I've provided a tab with this as well, and you can see that in the reference material that I've got tabs of the 5 different ways to play the C minor pentatonic scale. But I'd really have you take a look at these blues scale diagrams. The diagrams are really great to go off of because they get the shape in your head. Now the primary position that we're going to use for the minor pentatonic scale is this position 5, okay? All right, and I know I keep saying minor pentatonic scale or minor blues scale, and they're not the same scale if you want to get really technical, but we don't. So for our purposes, those are going to be used as the same scale, the minor pentatonic and the minor blues scale. They're just one note different, and it's the addition of that blue note that makes them different. So they're for improv purposes, go ahead and consider them the same scale for now. But position 1 is going to be your go-to. And if you're new to improvisation, really focus on position 1. Like, you can just focus on position 1 today. Most of the riffs that we go through are going to have a way to play them using position 1. And then position 2 is right here. Position 3. Now position 4, I can play it way up here. But I'm going to go ahead and drop it down an octave here, because just remember, 12 frets, you do anything 12 frets down or 12 frets up, it's the same thing, it's just in a different octave on the guitar. So this is position 4. And position 5. This is probably position 5, I would say. I'd say position 5 is probably the second most used position of the minor pentatonic scale. I think it's very, very useful. Now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to improvise a little bit with one of the backing tracks. This is the song Body of Work. This is not my backing track. This is one from the Jam Play library, so you have access to it, and it's in C minor, and I'm just going to use the minor pentatonic scale to improvise over it a little bit so you can hear what it sounds like. So right here I'm in position 3, up to position 4, and I'll drop position 4 down an octave like I did when I was playing it. Back to position 3, up to position 5, position 1. There's that blue note. Did you hear how much tension was in that blue note? So that's kind of the feel of the minor pentatonic scale over a minor key. That song was definitely in a minor key. Let me show you what the minor pentatonic scale sounds like if I play it over a major key, actually. Now this is something that's a little bit different, because last week we looked at the major pentatonic scale over a major key. Now I'm going to take the same song that we used last week, which is pretty peppy 12-bar blues, and I'm going to use the minor pentatonic scale over it and see what it sounds like. You hear how everything sounds a bit edgy, and it's a real cool sound. It's pretty awesome. I'll use the major pentatonic scale, which is the more happy one. This is what we did last week. Now I'll switch to minor. You can hear the edge that the minor pentatonic scale provides. So that's kind of what we're looking at this week. We're not going to get into combining the two scales just yet. That might be in a few weeks, using a little bit of the major pentatonic, a little bit of the minor pentatonic. When you get into that, you can really start creating some new stuff, really feel like you're truly improvising, and it takes a fair bit of control and everything, though. So the next part of this, I have just written in my notes, wait, doesn't this look exactly like the major pentatonic scales? If you look at those scale diagrams, those 5 different positions that I played, don't those look exactly like the positions of the major pentatonic scale? And the answer to that is yes. They are the same. They're not the same notes. The C major pentatonic scale is not the same thing as the C minor pentatonic scale. But what we'll talk about a little bit is major pentatonic, minor pentatonic, relative relations. So if we take a look at the C major pentatonic scale, and if Jason, if you want to go ahead and put up the relative and parallel major minor scale theory sheet, we're going to take a look at C major scale. It's C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Now what we do is there is a minor scale that uses those exact same notes, and that is the A minor scale. If we take a look at a C major pentatonic scale, that's the exact same scale that we used last week. Well, last week, with the diagrams, we had the root note was right here, up at the 8th fret for that diagram. If you look at what is now position, what we're calling position 1, and don't get hung up on the position numbers for these. I used what was standard, but if you talk to a guitar player and you say like position 1 of the minor pentatonic scale, they probably won't really know what you mean. Like, I mean, maybe, but like it's not necessarily a thing that's not a term that's used a lot of the time. So don't get hung up on the position numbers. Just get used to the shapes and everything. But if you take a look at this shape, what we've called position 1 of the minor pentatonic scale. This is we called this C major last week. But this week, if you take a look at that same scale shape, the root note has now shifted to that note in the shape. And so therefore, this has now become an A minor pentatonic scale, depending on where that root note falls and everything. It's all about where you put the root note. An A minor scale uses the same exact notes that a C major scale uses. It's just that now A is the root note. If we take a look at a C minor pentatonic scale, and we say, okay, this was the root note, well, there is a relative major pentatonic scale to that. One that's going to use the same exact notes, it's just going to have a different root note. And in this case, that scale is an E flat major pentatonic scale. It seems kind of confusing. Go over that theory sheet because we want to get to the riffs and everything. Go over that theory sheet. We will do a little bit of Q&A and everything, and we can kind of talk it out a little bit at the end. But don't worry too much about that right now because we'll talk about that a little bit next week. And really, this week we're just going to be working in the key of C minor. That's going to be what we're looking at for the riffs. So if that kind of was like, whoa, that's crazy, just don't worry about it. Do recognize, though, that a certain scale might have multiple names based on where the root note is. And eventually, this is something that you memorize. You just kind of get it in your head. I do want to go over real quick that the other concept on that same exact theory sheet is the idea of a parallel major or minor scale. A parallel major or minor relationship is a fancy way of saying they are 2 different scales, but they have the same root note. C major, the parallel minor scale to C major is C minor. It's pretty simple. It's not a big deal. You have C major down here. You have C minor here. But let's go ahead and put all this aside and we'll take a look at the riffs. They're all going to be using the C minor pentatonic scale this week. Jason, if you want to go ahead and bring up the riffs tabs, we're going to start with figure 1.1. We're calling this riff 1. And it goes like this. I'll go ahead and slow that down. And we're going to start at the 10th fret of the D string, skip up this interval of a minor 7, pull off 11th fret to the 8th fret on the B string, double back, pull off 10th fret to the 8th fret, and then you're going to implement the blue note here on the 11th fret and do a pull off, and land there. So please take note that this is using position 1 of the C minor pentatonic scale. Now what I had you do last week was I had you play the scale around the riff and then play the riff. So if I go... improvise using the riff and then land on the riff. And I think that's a good practice. I'll play it a little bit over this backing track. I'm going to play it slow. I'm going to play it as 8th notes. So it'll be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. You can hear how it kind of has that edge to it. Now I'll go ahead and try playing it as 16th notes, because any of these riffs that I give you at this tempo, that tempo was about 110, I think, 110 beats per minute. And at that tempo, any of these riffs can also be played as 16th notes, which is da 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 da. That I played as 8th notes. I'll do it again. So I'll play it as 16th notes. So it goes by a fair bit fast, twice as fast when you do it as 16th notes. So start off by doing it as 8th notes. And then eventually be able to work it in as 16th notes. After next week, one thing that we're going to do is we'll take a look at how to find the key in any given song that you may want to learn. We'll talk a little bit about that. That'll be our concept for next week. So you've got an entire library, if you're a Jam Play member, you've got an entire library of backing tracks, and that's awesome. But if you have songs that you just like to listen to, that you might like to play along with and improvise over, I'd like to teach you how to find the key of those songs and be able to improvise, play solos over those songs. It's a whole lot of fun. I do it almost every day. But anyway, that's riff 1. I'm going to show you another way to play it. That was using position 1 of the minor pentatonic scale. This one is going to be, if we take a look at figure 1.2, this is going to be riff 1, same exact riff, but we're going to bring it down to position 4. Remember, this is what it sounded like in position 1. Now we're going to do it in position 4 down here, which is that shape, and it's going to go. And start at the 5th fret, jump up to the 5th fret of the 3rd string, jump up to the first string, 6th fret, pull off to the 3rd fret. And so somebody asked last week, what's the reason for learning these riffs in multiple places on the guitar? And there are a few reasons. One is to train your ear to get used to recognizing that these different positions of the scale, they're the same scale all throughout the guitar. You know, if I go like this, like that, you hear how that was the same, same scale that I was playing, just in different positions. But the fact is, it's way more fun to utilize the entire neck of the guitar for improvisation versus just using one scale shape. But in order to use that entire neck of the guitar, you got to learn the rest of these scale shapes. And the really good way, I think, to learn to do it is by learning these riffs in multiple positions. The other part of it is then you can use the riff when you're down in this position. And you may find that certain riffs lend themselves better to certain positions. So that's figure 1.2, same exact riff as riff 1. If we take a look at figure 1.3, that is the same riff, same notes, but played down an octave. And we start with it in, I guess it's all in position 5. So 8th fret. 8th fret, jump up to the 8th fret of the D string, and then pull off, and it can be a little bit of a stretch for you. And you implement that blue note. Now, once again, play the scale around it. Play that position 5 of the scale, and I'll even do it over the track a little bit. So I'm playing the position 5 scale. Oh, sorry. And there was the riff. Played as 8th notes. This might actually be hard to do with 16th notes. Yeah, I'd have to practice that a little bit to get it clean. But there you go. So that's figure 1.3. And I'd say that if you use 2 of these, learn it in position, learn that figure 1.1, which is regular riff 1, and then learn that same riff down an octave like we just did. So if you want to learn 2 of those, what can be really nice about that is, I'll go ahead and show you a little bit here. If we play it one way and then we play it down the octave, it can be kind of cool if we go. So figure 1.1. And I'll play it down the octave. So that's kind of cool. You kind of create a little bit of a call and response with yourself there if you play a riff and then you play it down the octave. Now, Jason, you've got a question for me here. Hi, what is the relationship of minor and major pentatonic? The relationship of minor and major pentatonic. So what we'll do, what you're talking about, what we were talking about there, it kind of, I'm not exactly sure what you're asking about the relationship between major and minor pentatonic. They are the, if you take a look at the scale diagrams from last week, and then you take look at the ones from this week, take a look at position 5 of the major pentatonic scale, take a look at position 1 of the minor pentatonic scale, you'll notice that they look exactly the same. And that's because the shape is exactly the same. But they're not the same exact scale because they hold different root notes in the shape. The C major pentatonic scale is down here in position 5 of the major pentatonic scale. But then position 1 of the minor pentatonic scale, same exact shape, but it starts up 3 frets. So hopefully that helps a little bit. If it seems very really complicated, don't worry about it. For now, just focus on the minor pentatonic scale, and we'll do a little bit more with questions later. But hopefully that helps a little bit. If it seems really complicated, it's kind of because that's perfectly fine. I mean, it is complicated. It definitely is. But once you get it, it's like, oh, that's actually really cool. But it takes a little bit sometimes. For now, just focus on the C minor pentatonic scale. If we take a look at figure 1.4, and this might be a little bit more for the intermediate to advanced players, I have that riff 1. I've started it. So I started it here, and it's in position 3 of the minor pentatonic scale. Remember, it sounded like this. Well, I've got it starting up at the 15th fret. And then I want you to finish it. And that's your homework for the week. Sound it out using your ear. Can you sound out that riff in a different place on the guitar? Try it out, see what you're able to do. If you can't, don't worry about it. It's perfectly fine. You've got other places to play it and everything. But try to sound it out and see it using position 3 of the minor pentatonic scale. Now, another part of this Riffs with Mark course that we're doing is taking these riffs and finding ways to make them your own. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't care if you take these riffs and you record them, or if you play them in your own solos, whatever. Like, I don't care. Like, they're yours to use and everything, but it's going to be more fun if you find ways to make them your own. So I've made some sample endings of how to potentially end these riffs. And if we take a look at 1.5, this is just going to be an alternate ending or an extension. I'll play it the first way, and then I'll play it the second way, and then we'll kind of try to put them together because they can make a good call and response with them, with one another. So we'll take a look at the first line, just the first 2 measures of figure 1.5. It's going to go. So it's kind of, we've got some pull-offs going here and everything. We do this. Double back. And there we use that blue note right at the end. Once again, we're in position 5. We're in that position of the pentatonic scale. And I'm sorry, I meant position 1. My mistake there. And so that's a way that we could end it. Instead of just going, we could go. So that's one option right there. Go ahead and take a look at the tab. I'll play it slowly a couple times. That's the part that we've added there. And I'll do it one more time. And if you're a beginning guitarist or you're new to improvisation or learning riffs and you're still working on figure 1.1, that's perfectly fine. Just keep working on that. Just get that under your fingers. That's fine. This is really a course that's meant for multiple levels of guitar playing and everything. Now, if we take a look at the next line down, this is another way to end it. You'll notice it starts the same. And I didn't really play that in rhythm very well. I was thinking about what I was going to say. That's a little bit better there. But we start in position 1. Now we go. And we slide up to position 2. And then up to position 3. Remember, so position 3 is the cool one that has the chromatic line up at the very top and also at the very bottom. It's this position of the pentatonic scale. So we're walking down that at the end. So it might be cool if, like, you're playing a solo. You're coming along in a solo, and you play riff 1, and you play it that way, that top line of figure 1.5. 2, 3, 4, and then do the second line. So we basically just made 4 bars of a solo there, 2 different phrases of a solo using the same riff. We just changed the ending. I'll do it a little bit over the backing track so you can kind of hear it used in practice. So that was the first way I did it. I don't know if I can play it that fast for that second line. No, I can't. I'm going to slow it down to eighth notes. And so that's that second line there. Slide up to position 2. And you'll notice I'm up picking, if you look at that very last measure, I'm up picking each note. And that's because they're offbeats. Offbeats 16th notes like that especially, you're gonna wanna probably do as upstrokes. You'll keep your timing a bit better that way. It's better for your sense of rhythm and everything to play those as upstrokes. So if we go onward, and Jason, I'll go ahead and do we have any questions at this point? If you want to start putting them there in the queue, Jason and I are we've got a Skype thing going there and everything. So if you have any questions about this, please do go ahead and ask Jason. And we can address those probably at the end of the lesson. But we'll go ahead and go on to riff 2 at this point. Well, and actually, sorry, before we do, 2 things that I want to address. One, take this riff, see what other ways you can end it. There are a lot of different ways that you could end it. You know, you could go... Oh, sorry. You know, you could do whatever you want, however you want to end it. Take it, make it your own. The other thing that I want to mention, okay, and we're going back to the major and minor pentatonic scale relationship and everything. And if that seems complicated, don't worry about this part. But if you feel like you've got a grasp on that, on the idea of how the major pentatonic scale and the minor pentatonic scale keep the same shape, but they're 2 different scales, which sounds crazy, I know. But if you feel like you've got a grasp on that, go ahead and try taking this riff and playing it using the C major pentatonic scale. I didn't tab it out or anything, but all you do is you move it down to the positions that you know for the C major pentatonic scale. Same positions, different number positions, but I'll show you what I mean. This is me playing the riff in the C minor pentatonic scale. This is me playing the riff in the C major pentatonic scale. This is what it's going to sound like over the backing track. Wait for it. And play. Sorry guys, I don't know what's going on here. Didn't want to... There we go. Let's see. C minor pentatonic scale. Now I'll take that same riff and I'll play it in the C major pentatonic scale. Sounded kind of weird at first, it did, but if you start with it, I'll even do one of the extensions this time. Now I'll do it in C minor. Did you hear how it worked both ways? So that's kind of cool. Again, if that seemed complicated, don't worry too much about it. But do recognize that since the shapes of the major pentatonic scale and the shapes of the minor pentatonic scale are the same, any riff that you know from the C minor pentatonic scale can be brought into the C major pentatonic scale. Likewise, any note that you know, any riff that you know from the C major pentatonic scale can be brought into the C minor pentatonic scale. I believe one of the riffs from last week was this. It went... That was it. It was in C major. Well, I'm I'm going to bring it up to C minor, which just means I'm going to bring it up 3 frets. If that's the way you want to think of it, as going from C major to C minor, you just bring it up 3 frets. That's a way that you can think about it. But really take a look at where those root notes are in the scale, okay? That's the thing, that's why we've got an R in those scale diagram. That is for root note. So where you play that root note, where that root note falls, if you're in the key of C major, you want that R, you want that to be falling on a C, okay? So I'm going to take that same exact riff, and I'm going to bring it up, and I just brought it to C minor from C major. So you can do that with any riff, any pentatonic riff that you know. You can play it in major, you can play it in minor. Let's move on to riff 2. I want to get through 3 of the riffs today. That's how I'd like. Gosh, I hope we're able to do that, especially if we have questions. That's what we'll shoot for, though. Onward. Take a look at figure 2.1. Okay, this is riff 2. We're going to start using position 2. In fact, position 2 is really the best way to play this riff. That's how. Yeah, so implement that blue note right there. I really love this little chromatic line of position 2. We're in the position 2 of the C minor pentatonic scale there. And try to really see it around this riff. All right, beginner students, go ahead and try to get that under your fingers for now. If you're up for it, try to move on and take a look at playing it down an octave. I didn't put any other ways to play that using other positions in the same octave because it's actually very awkward just about anywhere else. In fact, it's awkward here even if you take a look at figure 2.2. You really want to start using your middle finger of your left hand. And it's because if you start using your one finger and go like that, and you got to get down to that note, it's just awkward. You want to play that note with your index finger. So then you got to play it like that, and then it's tough to play the next note. So if you want to play it down an octave, I do suggest starting with your middle finger of your left hand. It'll make a good pinky exercise. People never use their pinky nearly enough on the guitar. And that's the riff played down an octave like that. Here it is in its original octave. And I don't feel like there are any, there's nothing specifically tricky that I'm seeing with that other than just double hammer on. And sometimes that string skip might be kind of tough for it. So go ahead and move on to figure 2.3. And this is riff 2, and we've got an alternate ending here where we're going to go. And I kind of got the rhythm a little wrong there. Let me make sure I've got it. Yeah, there we go. Sorry, you write these and everything, but I wrote quite a few riffs and everything, so sometimes I forget the rhythm. And so that's just a different way to end it, still using only position 2 of the pentatonic scale. I will have you notice at the end when you drop down to that 9th fret, you're dropping down to a blue note right there. So just recognize that and see the scale around it. That's what this is all about, is making sure you see the scale around it, because otherwise it's just a riff. If you're not seeing the scale around it, it's going to be hard to use it in your own improvisation. So that's the thing to really watch out for with all of these, is make sure that you're seeing the scale around the riff as well as the riff itself. So that's 2.3. Oh, and that's the end of riff 2. Yeah, I think we are going to get through 3 riffs. And then looks like we've got at least one question there. Oh, I want to answer this question right away, so there's no question about it. The question is if I'm in standard tuning. I am 100% in standard tuning, yes. Good question. You got to ask it these days. I mean, you know, you get lots. I primarily play a lot of times in open D when I perform. That's a tuning that I use a lot. I also use standard tuning on my own time when I'm playing for fun. I'm in standard tuning a lot of the time. It's just a lot of the tunes that I perform are in alternate tunings. But yes, we are 100% standard tuning. So we'll get to the rest of the questions in a few minutes. But go ahead and take a look at riff 3.1. I guess what we'll do is we'll cover this riff, and then I'll answer any questions. And then if we have more time, I'll go ahead and we will get to riff 4 if that's the case. So take a look at riff 3, figure 3.1, and I like this one quite a bit. I always get a little bothered by tab with bending. I always feel like it's very, very counterintuitive a lot of the time the way it's written. It's hard to say because it's hard to like really figure it out based on the tab, because if you look at it, it's just 11th fret, 11th fret, 11th fret. So let's see. That's what it's supposed to sound like. It kind of reminds me of Voodoo Child a little bit. What's that? Yeah, but it's. So take the 11th fret. You're in position 1 of the minor pentatonic scale. Now, a lot of times I will play this note of the scale, that 11th fret, in this case, with the pinky finger. But since we're doing a bend, it's hard to bend with your pinky finger. I'm terrible at it. So I say bend with your ring finger. Go like that. And if you haven't done like any courses with bending, I think one of the biggest tricks is don't just rely on that finger to bend the note. It's hard to do that. Get your other fingers behind it on the string. And sorry, I'm kind of getting that 3rd string a little bit. But get at least your middle finger behind it. You'll get a ton of power in that 2nd finger of your left hand. A lot more than if you just try to bend with your ring finger. If you're on an acoustic guitar, sorry, bends are tough on an acoustic guitar. They really, really are. But the B string on an acoustic is the easiest string to bend. The G, or the 3rd string on an electric guitar, is the easiest to bend. And that's the next one that we'll do. So we go 11th fret, play it, then play it again, and then bend it up a full step. Bend it up a whole step. So you're actually bending it up to this note in the scale. That note. Well, really, that note as well, same note, it's a C. You're bending a B flat, in this case, up to a C. And it can take some power depending on your string gauge. I believe I have 11s on here, so I'm having to push a little bit. And so play it again, bend it up. I say don't pick it again while it's up. You can if you want, but I say just bend it up and then back down. And on the B string, you definitely want to push up for these bends. On the G, Sometimes you can get away with pulling down on the G instead of pushing up. I used to do that when I was a kid learning all the time, and then my guitar teacher told me not to do that. But you can definitely use, if you got to do bends on the lower strings, definitely pull down. That's perfectly fine. But for this, push up down to the 8th fret. And if you're looking at figure, and sorry, we're doing 10th fret. And if you're looking at figure 3.1 there, I've got it set up as doing a full bend in that second measure, where you go bend it up to that note that's in position 2, or that note of position 1. But you could just bend it up to the blue note. You know, especially if you're on an acoustic. Sorry, but if you're on an acoustic, you're only going to be able to bend that note a half step. That is a challenge. So you can go up a whole step. But if you're on an acoustic, definitely just bend it to the blue note here. And if you're new to bends, spend a little bit of time playing the note, then playing the note that you're going to bend it to, and then matching that note. I've been doing this for a while, so like I've got a pretty decent understanding of what a whole step bend is going to sound like. But if you're new to it, take a little bit of time and go, okay, well, how far do I bend this up? And you listen, okay, that's a whole step up. And you bend up and you get used to that and you practice that over and over again. So that's riff 3. If we take a look at it down an octave, it's in position 5. Like I told you, position 5 of the minor pentatonic is definitely something that you'll use. And notice I'm pulling down on the strings since we're using some of the lower strings. And in this case, I do have it only bent a half step. So I'm using that blue note. That one right there. So when I say I'm using it, I mean I'm bending this note up to it. And so go ahead and take a look at that, playing it down an octave. And I believe I have it in position 3 as well. Of course, get used to trying to sound these out as well. It's the same riff, and I'm going to keep just moving on as well. I have an alternate ending of it that's position, or I'm sorry, figure 3.3, where we go. And it's just a little tag at the end. That can be looked at as its own riff in itself. I'll just do it a few times, just that ending part. I think it's cool. And it's, if you just want to think of that as a bonus riff, but in this case, we connected it to that. And so it comes down to position 5, but we're starting in position 1. So you can see how position 1, I mean, that really is the bee's knees of this scale for positions. You'll find a lot of people really, really like to use that part of the scale. But all of the positions, you know, there's no reason why position 4 can't be just as good. It's just, you know, it's a matter of this happens to be a lot of people's favorites, position 1. But a lot of riffs can be played in different places. There are some riffs that are going to be played in positions better than position 1. A lot of them. So just keep that in mind. But then I've got this one down here, the next one down, it's another extension, and it's a similar extension to what I just showed you there, but we're going to go a little bit longer. We go... And we come up to position 2. So the whole thing we go... I got to get that under my fingers a little bit. It's a lot of very legato playing, or that's at least what we're shooting for. We go, we do, of course, the beginning of the riff. So it's pull off, hammer on, pick and hammer on, and then this gets really legato, really flowy. We go 8th fret of the 3rd string, hammer onto the 10th fret, then slide up to position 2, and then within that same breath, we do pull off. We do pull off and then another pull off. So if you have to just practice that little part that goes over the measure line, starting on the 8th fret of the 3rd string, that's okay if you got to practice that. So I'll do the whole thing slowly. Cool. All right, folks. Go ahead and ask any questions with the last little bit of time that we have. I'd rather actually do questions than go on to riff. Riff 4 is actually a lot of fun, but I'm just seeing one. Jason, if we don't have any others, that's perfectly fine, and we will get into riff 4. But the question is, why did you start with C minor as opposed to A minor? That's a great question, and the answer is there's no necessarily any real reason other than I started with C major. We started with the major pentatonic scales last week, and that's what we did. So starting with the major pentatonic scale, I wanted to start with C major. And therefore, when we moved to the minor pentatonic scale, I could have had the option of using A minor instead of C minor, but I wanted to get you in a different spot in the guitar, and I wanted to give you a parallel major versus minor relationship, because that allows me to show you on the jam track the difference in sound between C major and C minor. But really, I could have picked any scale. Like I could have picked B flat major and B flat minor, something like that, because no key is better than another. They all really look the same. I mean, this is a C minor pentatonic scale. This is a D minor pentatonic scale. You know, they look exactly the same. That's the beauty of the guitar. If you take a look at the piano has the white keys and the black keys, and every scale has a different shape. And it's very, very, piano is very hard. On the guitar, if you know the shape for a major scale, well, that was a C major scale. This is an E flat major scale. No different. Like I'm playing different notes, but the shape was exactly the same. This is an A flat major scale. It's all the same shape, and that's what's really cool about these minor pentatonic scales is once you know one, if you know where to bring that root note, like if you know where that root note falls, how to move it around, and maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that next week. Maybe that's how we'll open up next week's lesson, is talk about moving the major and minor pentatonic scales around to different keys and look at what we would call transposition, playing riffs in different keys, because you're ultimately going to need that if you want to be able to improvise over songs that you play on Spotify or on your iTunes or whatever. All right, if there are no other questions, I am going to move on to riff 4, and this is actually maybe my favorite of the riffs this week. So I'm glad that we're doing this. Last night I was like, we should really have one more, and so I wanted to show you this. This is, if you only get one thing from this riff, if you don't learn the entire riff, learn the first 3 notes and take note of any place that those pop up in the pentatonic scale, not in terms of like, or I should say, take note of any place you see this shape, because it's a really, really cool shape. I could argue that it's actually my favorite chord. 15th fret of the 5th string, 13th fret of the 4th string, 15th fret of the 3rd string. And I think it has such a cool sound. What it is it's called a C minor 7 without a 5th. So a minor 7 arpeggio, if you've done any of that, a minor 7 arpeggio would go like that. And we're taking out the 5th of the arpeggio, so it's just the 1, the 3rd, and the 7. And it sounds really cool, and it's right there in the C minor pentatonic scale. It's right there in any minor pentatonic scale. You can find it here. You can find it here. Now notice it's a little offset because of the tuning change between strings 3 and 2. There's a little bit more of a gap there, but you can hear how it's the same thing. So it's just the first 3 notes of this riff. I really like those notes. But I'll go ahead and play the whole riff for you. That's it. And I really, really like that kind of thing. It jumps a lot. Like it's a lot of, there's a lot of span. And if you're any good at sweep picking, if you are, which I'm not, I've never been a metal guy or anything, but if you can sweep that, it would be pretty cool. You'll see that I've got them all set up as downstrokes for the first, 5 notes? I just think it's kind of a cool little riff there. Now, take note of the scale around it. We're in position 3. Make sure that you see the scale around it and you're starting on the root note of the scale there. I guess another thing that I should have mentioned about with the scales and seeing the scale positions around the riffs that you're playing, take note of where the root note is. Try to always know where the root note is. Some people would say don't land on the root note. Like a lot of jazz riffs don't land on the root note. Like that's a big thing in jazz a lot of the time. They're like, oh yeah, don't land on the root note, play the flat 13 or stuff like that. Don't worry, go ahead and land on the root note if you like. A lot of these riffs land on the root note. You don't have to though. Like you can pick whatever note you like to end the riff on and everything. But take note of where the root note is in your riffs. And I'm just going to play a different variation of the riff. This is figure 4.2. And what I really like about this one is that it outlines that same chord, that minor 7 note 5th, up an octave. So that's a really nice, useful arpeggio. Just that very last measure there. Just a figure 4.2, the very last measure. That can be really, really useful in your improvisation. Like you'll see what you can do with that. With all of these, see what you can do with them. But I really like that little arpeggio. Yeah. All right, Jason, do we have any other questions at all? I think that was, that's not quite the very, I guess what I had there for the very last one is the same kind of thing, the same concept of that arpeggio down an octave, so it's not the same riff, it's just the concept of that minor 7 note 3rd arpeggio. It's that shape again in the minor pentatonic scale, both here and here. So we play it here, and we play it there. and it's cool. It's one of my favorite parts of the scale. So go ahead and take a look at that as well. Practice over the jam tracks. Jason, did you? I just want to make sure that they know some good jam tracks to practice over. So hopefully we've got a list there for you and everything. But you can. I do want to cover this real quick. Minor keys. There are two jam tracks that I found that work really, really well for this. One is called Body of Work, and that's in the Jam Play library. And that you're going to use C minor over. Awesome. And then the other one is C minor Jam. That's in the Jam Play library. Now, those are both minor songs to use the minor pentatonic over. The other one is I'm not exactly sure what we're calling it. It's the one that I made, and it's the 12-bar blues in C. Now that's a major. That is in C major. You can use C major over it, or you can use C minor pentatonic over it. Either one, it's going to work just fine for that one. You'll notice the C minor is very edgy. C minor pentatonic. I'm sorry, but folks, thank you so much for being part of Riffs with Mark. This has been a lot of fun for me this week. Hopefully things made sense, and if not, come back with questions next week, and also post them below. See, let us know how we're doing with this series and everything. I'd definitely love to get your feedback on everything, if it's useful, if it's making sense. But next week we're going to talk about riff transposition and finding the key of a song so you can improvise over it. So I hope everybody has a good week. I'll see you next Friday.